corruption? What about the police brutality? What about the oppression of the minority groups that this country is?
Responsible, you're sick.
What? I am not immoral, Mrs. Jurgens. You want to know what's immoral? Do you want me to tell you what's immoral? War is immoral. Poverty is immoral. Racism is immoral. Police brutality is immoral. Oppression is immoral. Genocide is immoral. Imperialism is immoral. This country represents all those things.
It's loaded with double-aught buckshot.
When are we going to have love? When are we going to have brotherhood, huh?
As I'm getting older, chip upon my shoulder, blown through life to roll over and die. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, oh.
Hey guys, it's Streed, and today I'm going to be reviewing the brutal 1970s pseudo-documentary, Punishment Park. Punishment Park was directed by Peter Watkins. It starred various untrained actors playing the anti-war protesters, the tribunal, and the police officers. The film is a pseudo-documentary about a group of draft dodgers and anti-war protesters being trialed and detained, given the choice between a hefty prison sentence or the newly established hazardous program dubbed Punishment Park. Those who choose Punishment Park are subjected to trek 3 days in the sweltering California desert without the necessity of food or water, the goal of which being to obtain the American flag residing 53 miles ahead. Upon reaching this flag, they're supposedly granted freedom and absolved of all their charges, and with this perilous trek they're faced with the unforgiving desert, along with the equally unforgiving officers sharply in pursuit of the destitute protesters. I actually watched this with my good friend acknowledging our discontent, and I was very shocked by its contents. This is definitely one of those films that when you watch it, it doesn't leave you, and it gets you thinking for a long time afterwards. It gave me a similar reaction to when I watched something like Ladybug, which I'm still feeling the fucking aftershakes after watching that. Hey, you know what? I should probably review that on Street Reviews sometime. I've considered it. I definitely want to rewatch it. It's undeniably an underrated hidden masterpiece. But anyways, I watched this with him, and I had actually seen... he had actually seen it a few years before, in like 2019 or so, and he said that, dude, this... I'm the one that brought it up. I was like, you know what? I don't really know what to watch. We could watch The Great Outdoors, Alice from 1988 with Schwankmeyer. I think that's his name. I don't know. But anyways, I brought up those choices. I wasn't really in the mood for Alice. He didn't want to watch The Great Outdoors, so I brought up Punishment Park, and he was like, you know what? That actually looks like a film that you would really like, because the film... already, like, I had heard of it like 2 years ago. I didn't know much about the plot aside from it was a very grisly pseudo-documentary. And I have a real interest for things like that. Things that appear to be so real, yet they're fictional. You know, maybe something like August Underground, but this is a lot more tasteful than August Underground. I'm very mixed on August Underground. But anyways, this film already has a lot of things going for it that I really enjoy. For instance, the writing is fucking incredible. It's set in the desert, and it's got a court drama. It's a court drama too. It's like partially a court drama, and it's also set in the desert, and it doesn't focus on one thing for too long. And I like how it variates between the two things, so it doesn't come off as boring. Because even though this film is very stark and realistic in its approach, and a lot of it is very dialogue driven, I would not say that it is boring. It's not boring at all. This is honestly one of the greatest films I've ever seen, and it's a shame that it's been basically buried nowadays, because when this film was released, it was very polarizing and very controversial. Like, this film, I would like to say this film is a pastiche to 70s politics. You know, you had the people evading the draft, and then you had the people fighting the war. castigating the draft dodgers, being like, you communist, you hate the country. And then the anti-war protesters are like, oh, I don't hate the country, I hate the war, dick. That's basically 70s politics in a nutshell. And I'm not trying to be funny. That's kind of how it went. I'm kind of oversimplifying it. But yeah, this film is so good at expressing the divide that happened in the 70s. And even though it was made in the 1970s, it still feels very of its time. Now, with that intro out of the way, let's get to the strengths. The acting is absolutely incredible. And it may surprise you to realize that none of these actors were professional actors. Not one. None of these were professional actors, yet their performances are so raw, so emotional, so real. I mean, there's some stuttering, there's some stammering, like I'm doing now, but it feels real because it's almost like found footage-esque, even though it's a lot more tasteful than that because it's supposed to be a fake documentary. And it's just, I find it so fucking incredible how none of these actors were professional. They were all just random people. Some of them were actual anti-war protesters. And some of the tribunal were actually people who were against them. And that's another interesting fact about this. The director, Peter Watkins, who AOD told me about, he makes a lot of these kind of pseudo-documentary films. And if they're as good as this one, I've definitely got to check them out. Well, anyways, what I was saying was, the director, Peter Watkins, he actually hired people who were politically opposite. Obviously, there's no murder or anything that actually happened. That was fake. But he hired people from opposite ends of the political spectrum, like for instance, the pro-war people, the anti-war people. And I think that's partially why the acting was so fucking amazing, because part of it felt real. The debates, the screaming, the political ideologies like clashing, it felt so real, and it partially probably was because these were people who believed in what they were saying in real life, and that is such a creative thing to do. It adds so much real drama and tension to the film, and I think that's what a lot of modern films are missing, because we have people who honestly can't act at all. And because the thing is about acting that not many people realize is it may be fake, you may be putting on a mask, but these emotions that you're feeling, they're real emotions. You draw them from real places. A good example of this is in Shaun of the Dead, when Shaun has to shoot his mom. He actually envisioned killing his real mother. And after that scene, he broke down and cried. And that is the key to acting. Feeling is the key to acting. And I will always say that. And speaking of which, the film doesn't really have necessarily the most I wouldn't say not interesting, but the characters aren't fleshed out. They're more of like, and this is not even a criticism, it's supposed to be a documentary. The characters aren't like necessarily fleshed out. You don't know about them personally. You just know what they believe in politically, what they stand for. And I like how another added bit of realism to this film is, like a documentary, it presents all sides. We get to know the tribunal side, who are like really hypocritical, authoritative fucking cocksuckers who are dehumanizing these poor anti-war protesters who, despite all odds, despite even knowing they're going to die, they keep fucking lashing out against them. They're not making that shit easy. They're like, fuck you, get fucked. And these fucking tribunal motherfuckers are out here being like, oh, don't say naughty words, that is immoral. Naughty word, immoral. Even though they're the ones subjugating these people to these inhuman, horribly cruel acts. They're, honestly, the tribunal and the police officers in the film, Scumbags, fucking scumbags. I hated them, especially when one of them referred to these protesters as horses. Be like, oh, these kids are like horses. You gotta train them. They'll be running around. It honestly summons your anger. It gets you boiling, because even though the camera crew is impartial until like near the end, it shows you both sides, but you start to form your own opinion that, dude, these tribunal motherfuckers and these robotic killing machine police officers, they're cocks. And now I want to preface this. Despite the political opinions stated in the film, I'm not one of those dumbass ACAB motherfuckers who are like, all cops are bad! My thoughts on that situation is there are bad cops. Not all of them are bad. But the thing is, I think the problem is when you single out the police force as just this horribly oppressive thing, when you think that the entire police force is just made up of bigots, I think that's idiotic, because anyone with a high status of power in any position, you could be a telemarketer, you could be like a famous chef, you could be a famous actor, a famous politician, any position of power that is high status can corrupt you. Power corrupts indefinitely. It would probably corrupt me, so I'm not even gonna moral grandstand. I have an issue with selfishness, not to get too personal, but I have an issue with selfishness, so I don't want any kind of government stature. Fuck that. But anyways, the tribunal are one of the most unlikable characters in the film. Not the whole, one of the group of unlikable characters in the films. In the film, because they accuse these anti-war protesters of being communists, yet they implement communistic rules. And that's where you begin to realize these motherfuckers are demented sadists. And I think that's the majority of reason why these people are the shit. Sorry, I'm having a stressful day. Well, anyways, it's just fucked up how these tribunal motherfuckers, they don't practice what they preach. They drone on about morals all day, yet they do immoral things, you know. They implement immoral practices, you know. The protesters, they're trying to speak out, they're trying to defend themselves, and these fucking tribunal motherfuckers are literally silenced one of the dudes. They're beating them, they're hurting them. It's pretty fucked up. I believe that the majority of these motherfuckers don't even believe in what they say. They're just using this ideology as an excuse to be abusive cocksuckers. And like I said, the atmosphere is very realistic and very gritty. I honestly forgot I was watching a fake documentary. It makes you feel, watching it itself, it makes you feel like you're watching a documentary that should have never seen the light of day. Like it should have never been released. It feels like it was actually real. And I applaud the director, Peter Watkins, for making such a realistic and uncompromising film that really challenges beliefs. Like, not mine, because I'm apolitical. I think both sides are screwy in their own ways, you know what I mean? But I like how it challenges your beliefs. And the plot itself, it kind of feels like something that could actually happen, because there's lots of people who call and scream, oh, conspiracy, that's a conspiracy. The world's a crazy place. Okay, crazy things can happen. I'm not saying we're going to see dragons flying around in the skies, murdering motherfuckers. But a government practice like this, it seems pretty likely. Now, I'm not anti-patriotic. I love America. But the thing is, and I think this film is trying to say, that America's not perfect. No place is perfect, really. I don't think there's any place on this world that is completely uncorrupted. It's all fucking corrupted. America can have the potential to be a great place. And it can also have the potential to be a bad place, but that's just human nature. That's why things like racism just doesn't make sense. You know, when you're racist against another race, saying, oh, they're all evil. Anyone can be evil. Any race, any person, any color, any gender, anyone is capable of good and evil. Little words of wisdom from Streed. Well, anyways, another little note I noticed, the narrator kind of sounds like Donald Pleasance. I know it obviously wasn't him, but he kind of sounds like him. And the soundtrack, I really like the soundtrack. It's very minimalistic, on bordering like experimental, but I think it fits perfectly with this film's grim and dark atmosphere. I'm actually glad that there was a lack of music, because it really added to the realism. The music itself kind of reminded me of the score from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's this gong theme that plays throughout the film, and I even mentioned this to Acknowledging Our Discontent. It sounded like a very egomaniacal theme. I considered it the theme song of the Tribunal, because it kind of reminds you of those Chinese emperor gongs, you know, like when the Chinese emperor is like sort of like, I'm not even naming a specific one, like any of them, they're walking out and it's all menacing, like boom boom, you know. It sounds like it's so foreboding, and it sounds like their own ego. It sounds like a power thing. Now, maybe I'm getting a little too in depth. Well, not in depth. Maybe I'm reading into it a little too much. But that's kind of how I saw that's kind of how I viewed the soundtrack. And another great aspect of the film is the haunting ending. Now, like I said, the main plot of this film is these protesters. They get to pick Punishment Park, where they spend 3 days in the desert with no water, no food. They got to run across the 50 miles or so to get this flag. And when they finally reach the flag, the fucking officers stop them and be like, if you cross, we're going to kill you. And they end up trying. They desperately try to get the fucking flag, and they're beaten to death. As this other group of protesters are being interviewed, and they all pick Punishment Park. So it feels like this entire fucking thing, this entire Punishment Park program, was just a cynical and heartless, sadistic game. These people were used for fucking target practice. And that's the ultimate sadism. Honestly, they promised them freedom, because if they reach the flag, they get to go completely free, you know. All charges are dropped, they're free, supposedly. And I should have seen this coming, honestly. I probably should have seen this coming, but I didn't see it coming. They end up getting killed, and the other ones are brought right in. And the film closes on this haunting line. It'll happen again as long as we've got this type to deal with. So it basically implies that the cycle is repeated and repeated and repeated. You know, now that I think about it, this film sort of feels like an episode of The Twilight Zone. I can imagine this film as an episode of The Twilight Zone. And as for my weaknesses, I have none. This film was a masterpiece. I'm going to have to give it a definite 10 out of 10. I absolutely loved it. One of the most shocking, genuinely shocking and disturbing films that I've ever seen. And you're doing yourself a disservice by not watching it. Now, a little caveat to this whole thing. Well, I don't know if that's the right term. A little caveat, I don't know. Caveat emptor to this film. It is quite political, but I think anyone who's open-minded enough, I think anyone of any political ideology is able to enjoy this film, because no matter what side you're on, ideology is like a knife. And that's what this film's trying to say. Ideology is like a knife. You can either use it to cut an apple or a person. And I think this quote from Rod Serling sums up this film the best.
Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete.
Overall, a timeless, amazing, incredible, uncompromising, gritty masterpiece, and I absolutely recommend it. Well, guys, that was my review, and I will see you all next time.